Well, hey everybody, welcome in and let's get started. Let's talk about watches, and tonight we're going to talk about Szanto. More specifically, we're going to delve into their vintage series. And what's really cool about this series is that it's predicated on actual builds ranging from the 1920s up through the 1950s. However, built on a much larger or grander scale to handle the contemporary demand. Plus, these are all built in a clean room, which basically think of it as like a surgery theater. You have to put on a special suit, and then you go into an antechamber and get blasted with high pressure air to get rid of dirt and dust and so on, and then you're allowed in. There are watches that sell for many multiples of the prices you'll see tonight that aren't built in this kind of a facility, but these are. Now, our guest tonight, Barry Cohen, will be delving much more in depth into that, but basically, if you already are following us via email, or for that matter here with a video, now that I mention it, just hit the link off to the side or underneath, depending on the device you're watching with, and all of the final show specials are available immediately. You do not have to wait for us to officially get to it. First, a couple of things. Big hello and thank you to those of you who are new. We appreciate you joining us. And if you haven't yet signed up for the email list, please do. I promise we're not going to spam you. You're going to get an email a day, which means you'll get the deal of the day, but you're also going to get news from the watch industry and news from us here at Talk About Watches. For example, we're working on a couple of really big deals now that you'll want to know about, and you'll be first in the email list to be able to get that. Another advantage of the email list is it will give you access to our private group, our closed group on Facebook. Now, the advantage there is sure, you can post pictures and we want you to, and you can get into conversations and so on, but also that group gets first dibs on everything. Every deal of the day, sometimes they get specials that are only given to that group and so on. And all of this access is free, and we want you to be a part of it. So just look for that in any of the emails. And the other thing I want to mention is PayPal credit. As you're checking out on the final page, you'll have an option for that. And here's the advantage. You'll have 6 months interest-free with nothing down, and as long as you pay that out before the due date, there's no interest charge of any kind. So you don't get a monthly payment, there's nothing down, there is no interest. It's really flexible. If you think about the traditional 6-pay, basically you've got 6 rigid payments. And by the way, if you want to go that route, that's fine. Just divide your purchase up by 6 and you're good to go. But if you need that flexibility, maybe you skip a month or double down or whatever, that's the way to do it. So check the box for PayPal credit. Once you qualify, you are good to go. So it's really just that easy, and it'll make purchasing a whole lot better, I think, for a lot of you. So please enjoy. All right, with that being stated, let's get underway. Oh, actually, really quick, one other reminder. Please follow us on social media. Now, obviously, there's Facebook Live and YouTube Live, and that's where you're watching us right now. But you can also follow us on Instagram or on Twitter or on Google+. So whatever platform or platforms works for you, please join us. We'd love to have you along there. And if you would, do us a favor. If you like what you're doing, please share this video and our other videos around. It'll really help us out to get the word out, not only about the deals, but specifically our company Talk About Watches as we continue to build. And we greatly appreciate your support. All right, enough stated. Let's get going and welcome Barry Cohen and Szanto to the show. Well, hey everybody, as promised, Barry Cohen back on the show. Some of you may recall him from not all that long ago doing the CT Scuderia show. And Barry, congrats on that, man. People love what you do.
Well, thanks so much, Tim. I love what I do.
It shows, and I love what I do, and I know that collectively we can be, frustrated and all of this, and I think for good reason at times. But you know what? At the end of it all, what we're putting together, what you do, and what we do at Talk About Watches means that better watches are coming out at better prices. So the consumer wins, the collectors win, everyone in the industry at the end of it's going to win. So we're excited to be a part of it. So I mentioned CT Scuderia. And some of you may recall, like, for example, some of the monster stuff we did on July 4th and the flash sales and so on. But you guys might not necessarily know, though Barry did appear with us on July 4th, that you also work with Szanto. And I got to say, honestly, Barry, and we're about to prove this, for dollars spent, this has got to be one of the best buys in the industry right now.
Well, I think it is. And when your customers hear some of what I'm going to tell them today about how these are manufactured, I think they'll be suitably impressed.
Yeah, and that's one of the advantages that I love that we have here at Talk About Watches Live, is since we can just talk about whatever we want for as long as we want. Today, Barry's going to talk a bit about how these watches are put together. And you, as I'm talking to you now, Sebastian may even have put up some of these images for you. These are watches that are built in a clean room. And by that, and we're going to get into this in a bit, but for those of you who don't know that terminology, that doesn't refer to like a really nice room. Now, most watches are built in a really nice room at some point. But think of it like a surgical theater.
Yes.
It's like that. And I've been in, I think, one or two. You have to go through a separate antechamber, and you have to wear a suit that looks like you're in one of the old Woody Allen movies. I mean, it's crazy. And the result is that it's basically lint free, dust free, pretty much everything free, and it makes the watches better. So Barry, if you would, let's go ahead and jump into the first series here.
Sure, let's do that, Tim. Let me maybe I should start by explaining a little bit about the essence of the brand, though, so
Sure,
that you
please.
know what we're all about. Szanto is a brand that I started a few years ago, and I did it after actually there was a fellow that's a friend of mine lives near me. He's a celebrity chef. He's been on the Food Network for about 20 years. Tyler Florence. He uh, he called me up one day, and he's a real watch nut. He called me up one day and he said, "Hey, I see a void in the market, and I want to talk to you about it. I want to show you an old vintage watch that I just picked up." So I met him for coffee, and he showed me a 1930s Gruen military watch, and it was spectacular looking. And of course, he asked, "What do you think?" I said, "I think it's cool as could be, but it was so tiny. It was like about 33 millimeters." I said, "I don't think a guy's going to wear that." And he said, "I know, but what I'm saying to you is you should develop a line of vintage-inspired designs that are priced for today with quartz reliability and affordability, and fill that void because I don't see it filled in the market." So as I looked around, I noticed he was right at the time. Of course, today there's a lot more vintage, but at the time when we launched this, it was pretty much a rarity. So we went about creating designs in the Szanto brand that harken back to yesteryear, but are a little larger than those minuscule shapes. And that's what this brand is all about, to offer vintage essence at affordable pricing for today's consumer. So that's the snapshot, if you will, about the brand's essence. And if we jump right into the first piece, Tim,
Sure.
uh, the first series we're featuring today is called our Motorsport series. This series has a racing strap. You know, all of our straps are spectacular, by the way. I
Yeah,
urge
they
any
are.
one of your customers to take a look at how great the straps are. Um, so this is a motorsport style strap and a vintage flavor that kind of picks up the essence of some of the great vintage watches you've seen over the years, whether it's kind of an old Chopard Mille Miglia flavor or an old Rolex Panda flavor. And this has the Panda subdials. But here we do it in a Miyota quartz movement, which is essentially bulletproof. You'll never have a problem with our movements. And a nice aesthetic of a black dial on a tan strap with the silver subdials.
And
This
let's
watch,
do this, Barry, if we can, right up front. Can you start by please going over the manufacturer's retail on this, and then the show price for us?
okay, so Tim, the standard suggested retail on this watch is 275 retail, but these are being run on your show at a special of 30% off. I don't have
So
the act. You want me to
obviously,
calculate
guys,
that?
we're going to be talking about value here through the show. And Barry, maybe this is a good time to kind of jump off into this. I'm trying to hold up the two here together. One's the lighter dial, obviously, and one is the darker. Maybe this is a good time, especially at this kind of a discount, to talk about why it's important to know how these watches were put together.
All right, that's it. So I guess this is a segue into the clean room construction. I've been in the watch business now for in excess of 30 years. I've been in more than 30 factories in 30 years, both in Switzerland and in Asia. Uh, I have never seen watches in this price point manufactured in a clean room environment. Now, you described part of it that you have to go through an ante room where dust is blown, air is blown all over you to get dust off of you, and then the dust is sucked out of the space. You wear shoe covers, you wear white gloves, a white coat, a hair cover, and all of the employees in that room that are manufacturing the watches are dressed in the same manner, and they've gone through the same process. Not only that, the entire facility is both temperature and humidity controlled. So the atmosphere is exactly the type of atmosphere you'd want a watch to be manufactured in an optimal fashion. I'll add one more thing that I've never seen in all my years. All of their parts are kept in a storage in the same exact temperature and humidity controlled environment. So it's really remarkable. And this is the province, this type of manufacturing is the type you would see for watches of 10 times the price or higher. I've never seen it at this price level ever. And even being in a number of Swiss factories, I've not seen it in those Swiss factories either. Now, admittedly, I've not been in the very, very high-end Swiss factories, but I'm talking about factories that assemble many established prestige brands that I've been in. I've not seen this type of environment. So it's really very special. And it's part of the reason that this brand is experiencing less than a 1% defect rate, which is outstanding. It's somewhere near a 0.5%. And in 5 years working with this factory, Tim, and I know this is going to be hard to believe, but it's an absolute truth, we've not had one water issue not one. Over 24 quality control checks on all watches. All watches are tested in both air and water for water resistance. It's really just an outstanding facility. I can't commend it any higher than what I'm telling you. It's fantastic.
Well, I know you and I have spoken off camera to some extent about this factory, and Barry's actually at one point he sort of laments the additional cost because obviously, like anything else, if you want to get into clean rooms, and then clean rooms are going to have your superior techs and so on, there's cost associated with it. But Barry, you just hit. And again, we talked about this off camera too. What I think is the gold standard that you find within this brand, which is your failure rate is under 1%. Which, for those of you who don't know, that's astonishing. Most wristwatches, including some very expensive ones, have a rate that's higher than that. Now, of course, you're covered under warranty and so on and so forth, and you are here too for that matter. But the point is, it's expected. But that is an astonishingly low rate. And Barry, again, as you point out, it's not just the fact that it's that low; it's that low at in this price range. Which is,
Yes.
And I'm with you on that because once you put it together, I started going when I was in clean rooms, and you're right that the watches that are built in the clean rooms are multiples of this price, and I'm talking at the MSRP level, which makes
Yeah.
these at this discount all the more exciting, I think.
Yeah, we know. I know. I can tell you confidently that any customer that gets our watches will have no problems. None.
Yeah, it's really cool. Barry, walk us, if you would, sir, through this watch. Obviously, it's a chronograph. Let's just go through the basics really quick, like the inspiration, and then we'll take a look at our next piece.
Well, I mean, the inspiration just came from the world of motorsports, which we try to capture throughout the brand. We try to capture some different lifestyles, different flavors by series, and this series is just simply tied to the world of motorsports.
Sure. By the way, and I know somebody out there is asking, and this does have an excellent water resistance. It is 10 ATM, so technically you shouldn't scuba dive with it, but anything else you're going to be just fine. With that stated, and I know Barry's already mentioned this too, the leather straps that Szanto uses are spectacular, and these are on fine leather. I don't recommend you take them into the pool. And that behavior is not covered under warranty, by the way, when it comes to the strap. So just know that they're very nice, but it's as far as the physical watch, that is not going to be an issue. All right, let's go ahead and take a look here at the next piece, and we're going to move. And I should mention that first one, very millimeter wise. What did we have?
The first one was 43 millimeters.
43. That's what I thought. So it looks like we're going to get into something that is either slightly larger or at least appears to be as we get to this next example.
It's a little bit more chunky. It's not as thin a watch, and it is 1 millimeter larger at 44 millimeters. We refer to this series as the Desert Sands series. When we're trying to come up with a design on this, we were looking for something that had the feel of maybe something that you might carry the flavor of the era of Lawrence of Arabia, if you will. And the color palette also ties to that type of an environment. So the two pieces that you're featuring there, Tim, the one you're wearing has what's termed an antique silver plating. So it's made to look old from day one. We have oversized, and these are chronographs just like the first series. It's oversized with a 2-eye chrono with subdials at 3 and 9. But what I meant is by oversized, that we have numbers around the dial, but at 12 and 6 we have enlarged numbers, and then we did a cute little trick. If you can catch it on the camera, since we enlarged the 6 so much, we were able to put the date within
inside the 6. That's a really cool idea.
Well, as I said, I've been doing this for about 30 years, and I've never seen that. So I thought, you know what, this might be kind of fun.
That is a great idea. I liked your, on a personal note, I got to say, I liked your Lawrence of Arabia reference because I've actually been out to the desert to where they shot that, an area called Wadi Rum. And the colors there are pretty spectacular. And I love how you've drawn that warmth of the desert into this design.
Well, if you look at the markings on the dial, you'll see that they're not a bright color. They're a subdued kind of almost a sepia tone. So it really does pick up yesteryear. Here's another model that I just happen to have right here in the same series, and this one is absolutely spectacular with the with kind of a burnished leather. Our leathers are fabulous with a burnished leather strap, and the plating on the second piece that you showed was a burnished bronze plating. So it, once again, from day one, as soon as it's manufactured, it's made to look like it's been around for generations, even though it's been around just recently.
Yeah, and we should mention, by the way, that Barry is Szanto here in the United States. So you guys are getting this brand direct, factory direct. This is not pre-owned, and we've worked out this beautiful partnership where you guys are directly benefiting with razor sharp work on both of our team's parts, and you guys are getting quite the deal. We haven't talked about that on this watch, by the way, Barry. Can you go over the MSRP and then
Yep.
the show price?
Yes, sir. Well, first of all, the MSRP on the chronograph series is $295, but as with all that we're showing today in your show, Tim, the special price is 30% off suggested retail.
Awesome. So basically, guys, you're going to again look at a lighter dial. For the record, it's almost what I would call a parchment color, and then you've got this beautiful weathered bronze finish. Now, I want to be clear, this is a bronze finish. I'm not implying this is maritime bronze, but it really, really does look like it. They just nailed the color on this. And then the other, which is, I would call it a light gunmetal or a very, very dark antique silver, and that has got the charcoal black with subtle tan Arabic numbers and markers, a little bit of lighter white in there. These are, and I've mentioned this also off camera, Barry, that the aesthetics of what Santos builds is pretty spectacular. I think it certainly, to your point, belies the asking price on these.
Well, thanks, Tim. It's one of the, it's actually it's the place that I spend most of my time as far as the watch business goes, is trying to nail the aesthetics and nail the nuances of design. Because in the end, I don't know that a consumer looks at a specific watch and says, "Oh boy, look at that," or "Look at that." But it's more of a visceral thing. When you see a finished product, it either speaks to you or it doesn't. And this is the type of thing I think a consumer sees and then feels.
Yeah, the tactile quality of all of these is spectacular. And you guys in the audience, and when I say guys, I mean guys and girls in the audience, know what I'm talking about. When you pick up Szanto or you pick up any well-made watch, you feel it. Just like when you pick up a cheap watch that wasn't put together very well, and you kind of feel that. Well, this is the opposite of that. There's a real heft, and it's not just in this exact series, though it's true. It's true of anything that we are going to show you guys, and anything in regards to Szanto that you're going to see over on obviously talkaboutwatches.com. And if you're just joining us, by the way, first of all, welcome to the show. Secondly, you do not have to wait for a watch to be aired to get in on the show price. You're going to see, depending on what device you're using, a link. It's either off to the side or underneath, and just click that, and you'll go right to a page that is going to give you everything with final pricing, and believe me, you guys are going to be good to go. Barry, let's go ahead and move on to the next example, if we can, sir.
Here's a little bit of an exception. This is what we term the vintage diver. And here we wanted to pick up the look of traditional dive watches from the 1950s from esteemed brands. This piece, I think, is absolutely exceptional. It's a piece I wear all the time. By the way, I happen to wear that 4500 series, the Desert Sands, all the time as well. But this piece, and you mentioned earlier, Tim, that while our water resistance is very good, with leather straps, you generally don't take leather straps into the water. This series is an exception. This is a vintage dive watch with waterproof leather. So here, I'll show you a watch on my wrist that I've been wearing now. I've worn this now for about 6-7 months. It's been in the ocean, in lakes, in rivers, in showers. The strap is still perfect. So it's a treated strap. We have a 120 click, very tight bezel. This is the way a bezel should turn on a watch. Highly secure.
Yeah, there is no play. I don't know if you guys, I'll hold this up to my mic. I don't know if you guys can hear this, but not only is it a 120 click, there is zero play in this. That is a beautiful bezel.
That's how a bezel should turn. And again, with regard to the aesthetics, we tried to pick up the look of yesteryear once again. So the one on your wrist right now is a deep sunray blue with a tan strap. The other one that was in your hand, if I'm not mistaken, is again, an antique bronze plating with a black dial and a black strap, if not mistaken.
Correct.
These have applied indices filled with a very thick amount of superluminova. This will glow most of the night.
Sure. So it seems that given the obvious success of the brand, that your friend was right, that there has been this unfulfilled niche, I guess it's fair to say, that this brand seems to step up and do, which is let's take the yesteryear aesthetics, I guess, for lack of a better word, but let's update it. We'll make it larger and grander and use modern the technology to improve it, I guess, from in a sense anyway, from a technical aspect, but at the same time still delivering that sense of adventure, that sense of romance that these pieces from decades ago really seem to celebrate. That I don't think a lot of the current stuff necessarily does.
I'd like to think that we're doing it the right way. By the way, since we mentioned and touched on the use of superluminova, which is, of course, Swiss superluminova used on this watch. I should mention that the entire line uses Swiss superluminova throughout. So it all glows, but this one happens to glow the best in the brand.
Is this a mineral crystal or sapphire in this?
It's a mineral crystal, but it's a higher Vickr count.
Okay,
It's a
so
K.
now that means what for somebody who doesn't know?
Okay, so standard mineral crystal will be somewhere in the 550 Vickr count, and we're using something a little higher up into the 700s, which
And a
makes it
Vickr count, that standard refers to what? What's the benefit of the higher count?
greater resistance to scratching.
Okay, so in other words, this is it's a superior product you're using in this instance.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Which comes back again, as we've been mentioning, that these are watches that, and I'm hoping Sebastian's going to start cutting to some of these shots again. These are built in the clean room, and we don't mean just a very nice room. These are actually built, and the best way I can come up with a comparison is think of it as a surgical theater. You actually have to go through antechambers and you get blasted with the high pressure clean air, and you're in a suit where you're literally covered head to toe, and it's quite the little adventure. But the last one I was in, which was a few years ago, they actually have different colored suits they would put people in, so you'd actually know what they were doing. So they actually had like a pink group and a blue group and a yellow group, and that's how you knew how people got assigned, because you really couldn't tell who people were because they were all covered up like someone from Sleeper or something like that. And
Yeah,
so anyway, that's a little sort of an insight on that, but that's what you guys are getting at this kind of discount. That's why I love doing the show. If you guys don't own Santos yet, please do yourself a favor and try one of these out, because they're for especially with the arrangement that we have here. This is extraordinary. What you're getting for dollar spent. Ask anybody who owns one, and all of you guys that are ordering now or through the replays, you're going to get yours in a few days. You're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. Barry, let's go ahead if we can, sir, and let's jump into number 4.
sure. Okay, the number four is we call we call it the coin cushion, and it's because it's a cushion-shaped case, but with a coin edge fixed bezel and a half onion crown that picks up the flavor of the coin edge bezel. So once again, we pay a fair amount of attention to the nuances of design, and here you have that element of that half onion and the coin edge that really tie well together. This is a 2-eye chronograph once again with the subdials at both 3 and 9. Again, it's using Swiss Superluminova on the numbers and the hands. And again, I would point out our leathers are fantastic. Our leather sourcing is really wonderful.
Yeah, you guys do, and then let's talk about that leather just for a second. It's not only is it spectacular and it's soft. One of the things that I will attempt to point out here, and I'm going to be a little bit limited in what I can do, is to talk about how thick this is. And usually, if you're getting into thicker leather, you're going to be dealing with something that's very unwieldy and it's difficult. There's a big break-in period. Something you're going to find with these is, first of all, that thicker leather really speaks to yesteryear. You can think of some of the great pieces in the World War II era, or even in the 1930s, some of the adventure era sort of watches, things like that, but they had the thicker pieces, and I'm sure their leather probably did have to have a huge break-in period, but this stuff is beautiful. You guys are going to really enjoy this. By the way, I got to mention that there are 2 options here, both with, in essence, black dials. So, Barry, you picked out a polished case. We can call it the white case or the natural color of the steel. All their production, by the way, is 316L. Steel, just so you guys know. And then the one that I've actually got on at the moment, this is exactly the same case, but it's done with that really cool antique bronze finish.
Yep. Now let me give you just the slight differences in prices for suggested retail.
Sure.
The piece that was the polished steel, which by the way, we don't make much polished. So this was one of the rare polished pieces in our line. That piece that carries a suggested retail of 300. So your consumer would be paying, I guess would be 210 for that at 30% off. The other piece with the burnished bronze is at 325 suggested retail. So your consumer would be able to access that at 227.50. One thing I forgot to mention while we were talking about the dive watch, but frankly, it actually pertains to many of the watches in our series, as this one as well, if I'm not mistaken, is that it has a screw-down crown. All watches, of course, have a screw case back.
Right, and for those of you, again, let's do some Watch 101 very quickly. I'm not going to delve into it here just to keep the show moving, but for those of you who don't know, the least expensive way to make a watch is to use something called a snapback, and basically you just wedge the back in, and they just say, you know what, it's a cheap watch, no one's going to worry about it anyway. And I guess to an extent, the industry kind of gets away with it. I've never really been a fan of it. But when you start to get into better watches, remember this one's made in a clean room, so we're talking about a much higher level, higher, frankly, than a lot of watches that have been charging multiples of the prices you guys are seeing or using in Candor. That now it makes a difference. So when you get into the bigger, heavier watches, you're going to see the backs of them are screwed in. Now the reason you want that is not only is that still done by hand. I mean, it's aided with machines, but you've got the tech that does it, but it really helps with the durability. It can help with water resistance. It's the proper way to go about doing things. So, Barry, thanks for taking that route, man. We appreciate that.
Every watch in our line has a screw back. Most have a screw crown.
And this one has, and I got to comment on this because it's actually been, especially in retro series, is one of my favorite features. This has that coin edge that goes all the way around the bezel, or at least that's what I call it.
That's what I call it as well. Some people call it a fluted
That's
bezel.
true. That's forgot about that. Yeah, the fluted bezel. Yeah, I've always just referred to it as coin edge. But it's a great aesthetic touch on this piece, I think.
It ties well to the crown, I think.
Yeah, it ties because it's an onion crown, so it's tying that in, and then the whole retro thing. This has got to be, what, I'm guessing, a 44 thereabouts.
That is a 44. You are
Yeah. So,
correct.
and by the way, visually, I'm going to comment on this too, and then we'll take a look at one final piece for you guys. That these pieces, in my opinion, are going to play. Well, I'm wearing one. They're going to play a little larger than a 44, and I'll tell you why. The bezel on this, whereas most bezels basically fall across the top of the watch, this one comes down around the side of the watch. And because of that, there's not a lot of bezel to show up front, and it's, I guess for lack of a better word, an optical illusion, but it makes the watch play bigger, especially the dial. If you got the dial, it plays bigger, ergo the watch seems to play bigger, and that's what's going on here. Now, there's an advantage to this because you're going to have the comfort factor of a 44, but you have the look of something that, I mean, just to glance at this, if somebody told you, and this is also because of the cushion shape of the case, so fancy shape, so it's going to play larger also because of that. If someone told you 46, 47, you would bat an eye, especially when it's on. You would just, yeah, sounds about right. But it's not. So you got the comfort factor of the 44, but the look of something that plays a little bit larger. So pretty cool
And
stuff.
I don't know if you're able to, but if you could maybe get a close up there for your consumers, they'd be able to see that fluted bezel on the crown and see
Oh
how
yeah.
they go together.
Yeah, we'll definitely show that. By the way, since I've had the option of trying all these on, I can tell you I wear almost exactly an 8. I'm very comfortable at saying all these watches are going to fit at least an 8.5, and probably more. I'd be pushing it if I set up to a 9, but at 8.5, 8.5 plus, you guys are going to be absolutely okay. So again, on this piece, one is the white case that's polished, black dial. The other is the burnished case. That one's a little bit more burnished finish. It looks, to be clear, this is a finished steel case, but it looks bronze, and then has the black all super lumen nova used throughout. So very cool stuff. All right, so with that stated, we're going to move now, because I'm sure somebody out there is going, are you guys going to get to a mechanical automatic or what? And the answer is yes. And again, we're going to show two very different options. Now, this one, I held up the white case first. This actually has a very cool brush finish to it. But here's the thing, and I'm sure in this shot it looks black. And even in person, it often looks black, but it isn't. It's this fantastic forest green. I think it's gorgeous, personally. I've always loved the green blacks. There's just something about it that's majorly cool. And it's a Cyclops as far as the offset, which in this case is what is that? It's a alternate time zone that we're
It's
using.
20.
So that's one of them. And then the other Barry is, of course, the black case, which is also in a combination of matte and brush finish with a black dial. Let's start with the price on this, and then we can delve into it for a bit.
All right, well, let's start with the steel tone case.
Sure.
That watch typically carries a $425 suggested retail in an automatic mechanical. It's again a Miyota movement, but it has the 24-hour subdial oversized at 9 o'clock. This is a bigger watch. This is a 46 millimeter watch, and also has the oversized crown, because what we're trying to pick up was the look of the watches that were worn in way back in the World War I time period, when pilots flew open cockpit planes, and they had, obviously it was cold in an open cockpit, so you needed an oversized crown to be able to operate it with a gloved hand. So that's the look of this watch. That's the inspiration of this watch. One of them, as you mentioned, a steel case, and the second one is a black PVD case with a dark tan strap. I think they're both stunning, and they both have, again, super lumen over throughout, screw crown, screw case back.
I love, by the way, and I know you already referred to this, but I got to say, aesthetically, that oversized crown, not only because it hails back to the original pilot watches where they had to be larger overall to be worked with gloves, not to get too much off topic, but when you're talking about the pilots, World War II being the obvious, but certainly prior to that, we weren't talking about climate control or pressurized cabins, and that's why you ended up with those big, heavy pilot's jackets, and you see the fur collars and the lamb collars and whatever. And that's where all this comes from. So these are great homage pieces when you talk about not only making them bigger, this one being a 46, and again, notice most of the bezel comes down around the side, so I can put this on and it'll play bigger. And already bigger than a 46, which a lot of you guys like that, so awesome. The exhibition backs. But Barry, I love the attention to detail in bringing that retro influence directly into a 2018 build like this.
Let me point out one other thing for your customers, if I may, Tim, and that is that this has an oversized half onion crown because of the reasons we've just described, but it's rounded and soft, so it does not dig into your wrist, in case that was a concern of any of your consumers. The steel tone piece, by the way, normally $425 suggested retail on your show with 30% off is $297.50, and the plated version, which is in your other hand, is normally $450 and now $315 on your show at 30% off.
No matter which one of the watches that you guys choose today from the Szanto lineup, A, you're going to love it, and B, at 30% off, this is a fantastic value. And keep in mind that this is not just another watch at 30% off. This is a wristwatch that not only has very accurately hailed back to, you think of as retro concept, these are pieces that are built in the modern clean rooms. And I keep coming back to that because while this is certainly not the only watch built like that, for the dollar spent, it's going to be nearly impossible to find another watch that is built in clean rooms like this. Now, you go higher end, yeah, you can find them, obviously. But there's, I assure you, watches that go for multiples of this price that aren't using the literal clean room. And again, I'm not talking about just a very nice cleaned up room. A lot of watches are made like that. I'm talking about the actual approach to having the antechambers, and then they hit you with a high pressure clean air, and you're wearing the, looks like a hazmat suit, and it's quite the event. If you ever have an opportunity to visit one of those rooms, by the way, you should do it just to have the experience. It is something. Barry, do you have any final thoughts for us on this? And we'll wrap it up, man.
Well, I mean, we pretty much touched on everything, Tim, except one thing I would say, and you touched on the clean room, and of course I've been amused by your reference to not just a clean room, but an actual specific environment for manufacturing watches. When we launched the line, our goal was to bring very, very high quality into this brand and to do it at an affordable and reasonable price. We think for what we offer and the way they're manufactured, our suggested retails are reasonable, and certainly with the 30% discount that will be on your show and on your Szanto shop ongoing, we're trying to give your consumers a special deal on the brand, and at those prices it's an exceptional value.
And I think it's fair to say that you certainly have. We are going to wrap this up. Again, to see everything that we've talked about, just hit the link, depending on your device, either off to the side or underneath, and you go immediately to a page that's going to have the entire presentation there with the full discount, everything that you need. Obviously, the longer you've waited since the live broadcast, the lower the quantity is going to be, but hopefully we're still going to have some for you guys. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Barry, thank you for being again on the show, man. You've been great and very gracious guest. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Tim. Appreciate it.
And everybody out there, a special thanks to you guys. Please like what we do and share this around. And thank you for letting us be watch guys, man. It's a great adventure. So I think I've run out of thank you. So we appreciate you guys being there. And we're going to have another edition of Talk About Watches live for you very soon. Take care, everybody.